Ghana Means Business, brought to you by GOIL. GOIL, good energy.
Ghana Means Business. Your story, our message.
Warm welcome to Ghana Means Business, your apolitical, factual, and unbiased television show that presents the business, investment, and economy in Ghana today. Tonight on our show, we have a man who has seen it all when it comes to media communication. He's the man behind the Media Foundation for West Africa, which has pushed for media freedom in Ghana and across the continent. He has been a prisoner of conscience. He's a man of tradition and values and believes in the renaissance of the African. You don't want to miss this show. Please stay tuned with your host, Fredua Agyeman Pambuo, on your favorite television show, Ghana Means Business.
Ghana Means Business. Your story, our message.
Every now and again, GOIL makes good things happen. This time, GOIL has introduced Super XP Ron 95, a higher grade fuel loaded with additives and yet sold at the same price as normal fuel. GOIL Super XP Ron 95 enhances engine performance like never before. It maintains the engine by keeping it clean from carbon deposits. GOIL Super XP Ron 95 is designed to burn slowly and thus improves fuel economy, making you save money after several kilometers. GOIL Super XP Ron 95 gives you a smooth driving experience, that is, less vibrations. Fill up with GOIL Super XP Ron 95. Now there's no need to pay more for any higher grade fuel. GOIL has that sorted. GOIL, good energy.
Ghana Means Business. Your story, our message.
Prof, we want to take you back a bit. After President Rawlings took over in December 1981, you were one of the few appointments that he made in 1982 as the head of the government-owned Ghana Broadcasting Corporation. Why do you think you were handpicked for this position?
Thank you very much. Well, I was appointed Acting Director General for GBC in April 1982 by the PNDC, headed by Chairman Rawlings. I do not know why he chose me. What I can say is that I know that he had sent a message to me to be editor for graphic, and I declined. I declined for a number of reasons. At the time, I didn't want to take any position in the PNDC government for a number of reasons. One, I belong to a political mass organization called the New Democratic Movement, and when the coup d'etat occurred, we decided that nobody was going to take any executive position, that is a ministerial or any position of decision making in the government. And secondly, my wife was in the hospital at the time, and I thought I needed time to be with her. So initially, the suggestion for me to go to graphic was in January, and I wasn't ready. And so when he came back in April to ask me to go to GBC, I discussed it with my friends, and we thought that, well, I mean, if you are targeted for a position and you keep declining, it might sound like opposition or an act of a certain defiance, and so it wasn't wise to keep rejecting offers. Of course, in hindsight, that wasn't a very good analysis, but I took up the the appointment at GBC, knowing also that I was teaching journalism at the University of Ghana, that perhaps made him appoint me as head of GBC.
But what was your mandate at that time?
Well, until the Fourth Republic, the head of the GBC was always appointed by the president or the head of state. And the mandate of the Director General of GBC is written in the law in, I think, the 1968 GBC Act. That's what defines the functions of the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation and the role of the Director General. The PNDC didn't change that law.
But was there unwritten mandates, as in mandates that were communicated to you?
Well, when Rawlings appointed me, he neither gave me a paper nor a lecture about go and do this and go and do that. All he said is that do the work very well. I remember this very clearly. Do the work very well to support the revolution. That was it.
Looking back, perception, reality, what you did, looking at the lessons, looking at the events, was it a wise decision? And if you had to go back into history, would you have done what you did? Or would you have accepted the position to do what you did?
Every act or every decision, right or wrong, is within a context. In those days, yes, if that situation occurred at a particular time in our country's history, I was here as a lecturer, and I subscribed to ideas of change, because this country had gone through too many nasty, backward, and very difficult times. The country virtually had no direction. Of course, the Liman's government was democratically elected. Nowadays, we may say, why disrupt a constitutional order? But at the time, as far as I'm concerned, when Rawlings made his coup, there were expectations. And so taking that position was to take that position not to serve or worship Rawlings, but to serve my country.
So you supported the revolution?
Yes, I supported the revolution. As I said, I belong to a political organization, the New Democratic Movement, not a party, but a mass organization. Maybe at some point we would have become a party, I don't know. Our attitude to the coup d'etat was that it was not a revolution, but our policy collectively taken on January 2nd, 3rd, and so on, when we met to assess the situation, was what we called critical support to Rawlings' coup, to the revolution. In other words, we thought that it provided opportunities for certain transformations in the country's political, social, economic, cultural order.
Were your hopes and aspirations met?
As a member of that political organization, no. So in 1985, we felt that the PNDC was no more representing the revolutionary ideals or opportunities that people thought it had. So we declared ourselves opposition to the PNDC in April 1985 publicly at a press conference. This was published in external publications. The state-owned media, of course, at that time wouldn't handle such an information. But at what used to be the Accra Community Center, we came out publicly at a press conference to dissociate ourselves from the PNDC because we felt that we read that it was no more representing change in this country. Yes, so that's what was meant by critical support. We'll support it when it was making some transformative changes, criticize it when it was not doing so, or become totally independent when we thought it had abandoned, any attempts at revolutionary change or transformation in the social economic order of the society.
It's interesting you mentioned 1985 as the turning point.
Yeah.
Because between 1982 and 1984, major newspapers like the Catholic Standard, the Ashanti Pioneer, were banned from the editorial review of the GBC. Now, what necessitated this ban?
One, when the soldiers take over, it's a dictatorship. They respect or tolerate no opposition, especially in ideas. Two, the journalists or managers in the state-owned media know instinctively, as a tradition, that this is what we should do, this is what we should not do. In other words, the state-owned media had developed a culture of accommodating to dictatorship. So some of these things were not like decisions by, say, Rawlings or the PNDC
Or yourself?
or myself, but some of them would be done almost automatically by the staff. They know what to do so that they don't get into any trouble. Again, under the PNDC, and I assume under the military, the military people pride themselves with discipline, but it's false. For instance, the PNDC chairman is sitting in the Gonda barracks. The Secretary of Information is in his or her office. You find all kinds of soldiers coming and trying to dictate to the GBC staff. You see, many of these soldiers do not even understand the structure of GBC. They don't even know that there is a director general. They think, or they used to think, that the person who reads news is the person who is in authority in GBC. So they would interfere in so many things. A lot of times, the staff would come to my office and complain about what the soldiers are doing. They are just coming into the, into the newsroom and so on. So when I complained to Rawlings, what he did was to bring a captain to be in charge of the soldiers in GBC and to ensure that no soldier just walked into the newsroom or anywhere in GBC, but they stayed only at the entry. And this is why under the PNDC there were so many excesses. Of course, Rawlings, as the leader, will have to take most of the blame. A leader must take the blame for so many things. But otherwise, most of those things that went on were arbitrary actions that were done by soldiers simply because when soldiers take over, law breaks down, order breaks down, and there's no discipline. And so at the end of the day, the leader of the military coup has to take the blame for all the excesses and all the bad things that happen, because law, once you overthrow a constitution, you open the doors to lawlessness, to disorder, and the rule of law breaks down, and so all kinds of things go on. I'm not saying this to exonerate myself from things that happened in GBC when I was there, because
do you think that some of your actions led to the repression of freedom of the press, or were there instances where certain decisions by you, for example, closing down of private newspapers and also the lack of freedom of the press, do you think GBC was used in any way to perpetuate some of these acts?
I wouldn't say so, because GBC or the Director General does not make policy, will not take any such decision. You are running GBC, you are not running Graphic or the Catholic Standard or the Legon Observer or the Pioneer, no. You have nothing to do with them. The only things that GBC might do that might contribute to silencing contrary or dissenting or different opinions, maybe what we have discussed, namely stopping the newspaper reviews on the radio and not broadcasting like commentaries written by independent persons, or not allowing certain voices to come on radio, or not reporting certain things about certain persons.
Because it could be perceived as speaking against the government of the day.
Yes, so those things would certainly contribute to dumping down on freedom of expression and also discouraging independence of the media and press freedom. But otherwise, GBC would have nothing to do with the banning of other media or with the arrests and incarceration of journalists that the regime perceived to be whatever. GBC wouldn't have anything.
The ARBFS Bank, we told ourselves that we should be the most effective and the most efficient service provider to the rural and community. We need to serve the rural and community banks to be able to serve their customers.
ARB Apex Bank, with a network of 144 rural and community banks, RCBs, make up the largest network of banks in Ghana. We are everywhere, and so the preferred choice. Visit an RCB in your community. ARB Apex Bank, together for progress.
Ghana means business. Your story, our message.
1985, the NDM took a position to totally disassociate itself from the PNDC. Did you still maintain your position at GBC?
No. I had been thrown out of GBC in August 1984. I was there from April.
When you say you were thrown out,
Yeah.
Can you emphasize and share with us what led to you being thrown out?
Well,
as far as you know.
There was no reason given to me. It must have been July or August 1984. I'd been there 2 years and a few months. And one day, Rawlings just walked into the studio with a little statement to the news people to read. And I was dismissed from there. I think there were two other persons in some other appointees who were also dismissed on the same day. And then,
so you heard about your dismissal on the radio?
Yes, I heard it on the radio, and actually I was in my office at the time the announcement, the news, of course. You have to listen to the news and just see what's going on and so on. So I heard it on the radio, even though he had come to the studio. So I heard it. So I packed my things and went away that same evening. Why? There must have been many reasons. One, because everybody knew I was leftist. And on GBC, many programs or many things had been going on which were leftist. Some of them, well, today, one would say were not professional enough. There were many programs that were going on that many people in the society and also the international community didn't like. There was...
Like, example?
Well, there were programs that really bashed imperialism. And I knew that as part of the PNDC's negotiations with the IMF, the World Bank, for the structural adjustment program, they were also demanding certain concessions. And some of the demands by these powers were that they should sack all those Marxists from positions of significance, and I happen to be one of them.
But
And
that was a major betrayal in terms of ideology and faith.
I am not sure it was a betrayal. Why am I saying that I don't think it was a betrayal? Perhaps we thought, or so many people thought, there was going to be a certain kind of social transformation under the PNDC and Rawlings, who was preaching revolution and so on. But maybe we were all wrong. Perhaps we thought that's what was going to happen, but truly that's not what they meant.
Okay.
It's, in other words,
You were used.
exactly. Rawlings and his people used the left to galvanize the masses, to supply the ideological sweetness that the masses would love, get into the PDCs and so on and so forth, and consolidate their power, and then get rid of these elements who were a nuisance. That is one level. And in actuality, the PNDC systematically eliminated the left, who were recalcitrant with their leftism.
Can you name some of these?
All these fellows who were in the PNDC or supported the PNDC and were cast aside, the Kresa teams, the Zaya Ibos, the guys who founded the June 4th movement, who were really the first frontier of support for Rawlings and the PNDC. They were jettisoned, right? Even in 1982. There were coup attempts, Jewish coup attempts, and the PNDC Rawlings used those as pretext to get rid of them. The next line of getting rid of the leftists was the elements in the New Democratic Movement. Now, the second is that politicians or people in power must deal with certain practical realities. The PNDC needed money for many things. You see, 1980, 1981, 1982, 1983, 1984 were very difficult times in this country's economy. You couldn't get ordinary toothpaste. You couldn't get any of the basic necessities of consumption, of daily life, and so on. Life was very hard. The government didn't have money to import diesel, petrol, so transportation was at a standstill.
Was at the time that Nigeria too, we had an issue?
1983, they drove over 1 million people out of Nigeria, and so many things.
Ghanaians, about 1 million Ghanaians
were repatriated, were deported, and were brought here. 1983, which was also the most difficult year for the PNDC and for the country. There were a lot of wildfires all over the country. Suddenly, because the rains were not coming at a good time, the Hamatan and the dry season had been quite long, and there were wildfires all over, burning whatever food there was in the forest area and so on. The country's economy was really on its belly. The government didn't have money to purchase petrol, diesel, to power. And so in that year too, Dumso, started very vigorously because Yakosombo Dam had gone down because of the drought and so on. And the Nigerian government threw all of these Ghanaians out. And so the PNDC government was really between the rock and the hard place. But I think the PNDC handled the repatriation of the Ghanaians very, very well. The government mobilized so many trucks to bring them from the borders and undertook a number of measures to accommodate them, helping to send those who wanted to go into their hometowns to go there. And the government did very well. so that in the panic, there wasn't any major casualties or fatalities at all. I think the PNDC did very, very well. But again, because of the country's economy and how bad it had become, the PNDC, I think, had no choice at the time but to go to the IMF, the World Bank, for bailouts. So,
who was the Minister of Finance at this time?
At that time, it was Dr. Kwesi, and there were other advisors, Dr. Joe Abe, very key among the advisors on the economy. The late Amisata had come back from Nigeria at the time, and he was a member of that economic management team. And then Kwesi became the finance secretary. And so the government, when the government approached the IMF and the World Bank for this economic bailout, you were asking, wasn't it a betrayal of ideology and so on? Well, governments must respond to very practical needs of the masses. So if there were some elements or a tiny group of people espousing certain ideological things,
and they had to be sacrificed.
Most governments would sacrifice you for what they would consider to be the bigger issue to respond to.
And at that time, you had also served your purpose, so to speak.
Well,
in terms of galvanizing.
Within 1983, we are talking about within 1983. No, the government still needed us.
Okay, as in the movement of NDM.
The NDM, you know, or what they considered the leftists, they needed them because, remember, the PDCs, the WDCs, the People's Defense Committees were still there. And these were mass organizations that the left controlled. And the government needed the leftists to keep this mass support of the regime. So at that particular time, though by the end of 1982, the government had, the PNDC had, through all manner of means, thrown out the leaders, the founders, and others of the June 4 movement. They still needed those who they hadn't thrown out to keep the masses together, for the masses to keep continuing to think that there was a revolution. But when they approached the World Bank and the IMF and they introduced the structural adjustment program, then the divisions began to express themselves between the PNDC and those of us in the NDM and other elements in the left, so-called.
Folks, this has been incredible. An evening, an insightful, revealing, and informative evening with Professor Kwame Karikari. And we couldn't contain it all in one episode. So stay tuned, same time, same place, for the part 2 of a 3-part series with the illustrious Professor Kwame Karikari.